$5,000, and it starts February 20. And that none of the revenue, or net revenue, I should say, from that transaction was budgeted. So it is a positive for the overall borough budget in that line item, that category. You should see a larger than budgeted number come in for 201 Sabine Avenue net revenue for 2019. That being said, it won't be the total rent amount. There's a broker's fee we have to pay, and there are there's a broker's fee, and I believe they're on the hook. I'll have to check the lease. There might be a utility transaction in there that reduces the amount, the net amount that comes back to the borough. And any repairs or maintenance we have to do to the space over the course of the year, we'll subtract out of that. But it's good financial news, for sure. Yeah.
You budgeted for zero, right?
We budgeted for not being able to rent that space.
It's definitely a plus.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe we can, instead of finishing at zero, maybe we can have a little reserve for a change. Wouldn't that be nice?
That's good.
Any other questions on the borough manager update? Hearing none, we'll move to item 2, which is information for discussion. Sean, we had just left it that we wanted you to have a discussion with Rec Board with respect to how they function and a possible set of guidelines. I don't think has that occurred yet, or where are you with that?
I have not gone to a Rec Board meeting because I wasn't able to go to the one right after our last FMA, but I am going tomorrow night.
Okay.
And what we didn't talk about at the workshop meeting was the Ordinance 998, which established the Rec Board. Prior to that, the Rec Board had existed as an entity established by a resolution of council. So an ordinance was created setting forth the Rec Board's membership, how things are appointed, and what their purpose is, and how they report to council. So some very loose structure here in terms of what it is and what it does. And then there was a resolution passed in 2017.
And I think that was just for 17, right?
Yeah, correct. Outlining 10 tasks for the Rec Board to work on during that year. So this is a framework, I think, for council to communicate agenda, purpose, and process to the Rec Board that I'll bring up with the Rec Board tomorrow, see what they think, see where they're at with this list from 2017 and what a list like this might look for 2019, and how that communication would go both ways. Make a recommendation back to you all at the workshop.
It's just good that you're going to be talking to them. And then under item 2, what would be B if it was lettered, volunteer firefighter tax credit. Correct me if I'm wrong, committee members, I think we reviewed we both received a draft of 2 different ordinances. One which would extend it to existing and new members of the fire company, and another which would only extend the benefit to new members but would not apply to existing members.
There were other differences too, I can't remember them right now.
Well, yeah, what were the other?
The percentage, I think, was...
The money was different too, right?
Or at least we hadn't yet agreed on that.
Oh, we haven't agreed on anything.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't think we're going to... If you'll indulge me, my thought, but I want to see what you two think, would be to bring this up at our next workshop meeting and see what council thinks. But what are just roughly what are our 2 options presented as of now, and then I don't even think we should indicate what we think. Let's just take it to a workshop setting and put it out there, and we'll all talk about it. But what are the options on the menu right now?
I'll call it option A, which closely mimics the ordinance passed by Lower Merion Township. It's a 20% credit. It's to active and new members that qualify through attendance at incidents, training, and events. The overall annual cost to the borough at this point in time is roughly north of $3,200. That could be affected by new members joining, people dropping out.
And that's per year, right?
People adding on to their houses maybe even too would bump it up. Yes, that would be per year.
Okay.
The version B, we'll call it would apply only to new recruits, people who signed up after the end of, people who signed up after 1/1/2019. Borough employees and relatives of elected and appointed officials are excluded from the credit. The text had a 20% credit in it, expiring after 3 years of eligibility, and no call it credit, or there's a point system to determine whether you're eligible. So
Okay.
in this context of a point system, the version B says you don't get a point for a year that you served. You get points for other things, like attending things that year. The cost to the borough out of the gate is zero, obviously, because unless someone joins in 2019 and serves, they won't accumulate the credits to actually get the tax credit. So it's much more restrictive.
So both are the same 20%, right? It's just a matter of who's eligible.
And
sounds
how
like the-
long it could last for, also whether it was terminated.
There's no sunset on the
Right, there's a
first one.
sunset.
There's a sunset, a 3-year on the second.
Right.
And it sounds like the criteria with which the discount, and just for the public's awareness, this is a theoretical ordinance that we're discussing that would give volunteer firefighters a discount on their borough tax bill, provided they met certain requirements. It seems like the second version apportions credits differently. And it's just something that I think we should probably take to a workshop setting and gauge what council thinks, or do you want to kick it around a little now?
Unless we think that there's some significant reason why we need to talk about the budgetary impact of the difference between 3,200 and hypothetically whatever the other one is, I don't think there's anything that we need to do about it. I think we should, I agree with you that we should probably, like, it's more of a broader policy.
Do we want to, just council as a whole want to do
It's a broader policy
this,
issue that
right?
everybody on council, it's not really an F&A issue, I agree.
Yeah.
It's not a money issue.
Well, it's here because it's tax, but it's such a nominal amount relative to our
Exactly.
budget that we're not going to make a yes or no on 3,200 a year.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, I agree.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Be like Aaron and say, I see nodding heads.
That's nice, right?
They'll never say that again now that I did it. So, terrific. So that brings us to item number 3, which, does anyone have any questions about, or any input on the minutes for the last several meetings? I don't. Okay. The schedule of bills, I don't have any questions. I looked at the packet, but do committee members have any questions about the bills?
No, not the schedule bills. I do have a question about budget versus actual. Maybe I could ask it now.
Oh, yeah, that's a,
There's 2 categories where I noticed were January of 2019. Now, some I can see would be higher than, whatever that is, 1/12 of the year, because things are billed quarterly or whatever. There were 2 categories where I was curious to know. Now I can't find them, of course. There was rats. One was the public works fuel. I wondered if it was way higher than, it was like over 100% or something, and I wondered if that was transcription fees for hearings, where it looks like we're over the budget for the year already in January. And I don't know if it's an artifact of something or if that's a reflection that we need to revisit the budget. Those are my questions.
Both of those line items look strange in the budget versus actual, because we got bills in since we're on a cash basis, when you pay it, when you deposit is when it shows up. So we paid a fuel bill for 2018 in January 2019.
No, it's an artifact of
So unless
already held.
we pay next year's December fuel bill in January,
Okay.
we'll look over this year.
Okay.
So that happens sometimes with and the same thing happened with our transcription fees. The other thing about transcription fees is I really didn't have a good gauge for what it was going to cost to run a hearing.
the conditional use hearing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it had been a while since we had gotten a bill for any kind of a hearing, and then
Yeah.
that one came in. That's just the CU hearing.
Got it, okay.
Um,
You may have under budgeted.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we did.
So again, that was 2 hearings worth that we had in 18. We didn't get the bill to 19, but
Okay.
1,000's probably light there if we're gonna have anything more than 5 hours of hearings in a year.
Which we would.
1,000 will be light, so it needs to be a little heavier. But in terms of modifying the budget, we don't technically need to do that unless I would take a modification of the budget to council if it was extraordinary and I just needed to make sure everyone knew what was going on with a certain line item.
No.
We're going to be over in some things and
That's
under
fine.
in others for the year.
That's good though.
Thank
Like
you
I always
for
have a few
clarifying.
questions. I call or email or bring it up here, and it's just if we all keep our eye on this. Sean?
Yeah,
Right, Sean, gee, I'm
we're both in plaid. So,
Yeah.
You know. I noticed the street lighting. I hadn't realized how much the street lighting costs. So, in light of the new project, it's
on
great
tonight's agenda.
that we're going to
So
save
many levels,
significantly there. I don't know if for what duration this bill is, but
It's a month.
It's just 1 month.
Yeah.
We spend a lot.
It's
of money on
it's
that.
$3,600.
It's almost $1 an hour.
Right.
That's why the street lighting
$6,300.
upgrade can pay for itself so.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe it's a couple lines.
it's about $78,000 a year.
Okay. So that's just something I observed. The other thing is the advance bill. I wanted to just ask about when that contract is
Oh, good question.
up for renewal and where we are on that. Because I want to kind of get out in front of that so that we have good options.
Yeah, we do too. It's been on our radar. This is the 2019 is the last year, correct, Matt, of the current contract. So we'll be going out to bid in the fall and doing preparation for that process, so that we can make a decision in October or November's business meeting about who we want to work with in
In advance.
2020. There you go. Would prefer it to be October. Having gone through this transition, we did it a little bit late in the year, and then what happened was the sort of meetings we had to talk to the new providers and work out details got mashed into a very short amount of time before they actually had to go out and start collecting. So I would love to see an October business meeting adoption date. So I'll set that and I'll work backwards and forwards from that to get the timing straight. I think we'll go through infrastructure committee on that one.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's probably some strategic planning decisions to make about what kind of collection regime we want.
Mhm.
We want people to bid on. So if you're going to have people bid on multiple kinds of collection modes, scenarios, there's no harm in doing that. That's what we did last time. The ironic thing, I'm sorry to go off on tangent now, I promise I won't say it.
Narberth likes to talk trash.
Yeah, they do. We actually bid the existing collection scenario in this last round of bidding for trash service, and no provider bid on it. They submitted no bids to do the collection schedule that Narberth was doing.
The twice a week schedule.
The twice a week,
Alternating the second day.
alternating every Tuesday and Thursday, but not on a fifth Thursday.
Yeah. In my house, that led to a lot of, Jimmy, is it trash today?
Yeah, none of them wanted any piece of that action, so I think that's a good thing to keep in our heads.
Mhm.
Data.
Yeah, I like more options. I don't know about you two. I mean, this isn't really, we're not going to make this decision here, but I wouldn't want to go back to a schedule that I have to put that much thought into. Be nice to have a little consistency.
Yeah.
I kind of like the current schedule, fine, but we're getting off topic. But that's good. It's good. It does belong in infrastructure, and as far as I do share your thoughts, Rob, that we should get on that early, and hopefully we have a lot of choices. Anything else on the schedule of bills?
No.
Okay. So this will be. We're going to be introducing a motion to approve Ordinance 1014, which is an amendment to our zoning code. Do you want to explain to the committee and the public what this is that we're looking at?
Yeah. It's a continuation of a process that was started at least a year ago that led to some amendments to our downtown zoning district to allow 4-story apartment buildings on Windsor Avenue by conditional use. So the first section of the ordinance, Ordinance A, adds some refinements to the design and use standards. Should anyone come forward and want to take advantage of these standards in the future, by conditional use, they would have to step the building back as it got taller. They could have retail uses on the first floors. Garages couldn't be in the front face of the building, and the building needs to generally face the side streets, be they Forest, Essex, or North Narberth Avenue. Those recommendations came from the Planning Commission. Section B of the ordinance applies to our Montgomery Avenue district, which stretches from North Narberth Avenue to Haverford Avenues on the south side of the street, because that's what's in the borough. And it looks at the new standards for building design, some refinements that would apply to corner lots in the Montgomery Avenue district. So wherever there's a side street, you'd have 2 corner lots on the north and south side of the streets. Those buildings that would be proposed on those lots would have to face Montgomery Avenue. You couldn't have an entrance in the fronts of buildings. Notice a theme. They would allow the building to occupy a little more of the streetscape, the street side of the building on the side streets. And they also have a alternate path to compliance, to approval for the applicants if they want to deviate from the by right standards. If they want to deviate, they'll have to go to the zoning hearing board. And if they want to deviate from any of the standards, they have to testify that all the following conditions are true. Their site plan doesn't exceed coverage limits for buildings and hardscape. That there's pedestrian connections throughout the interior of the lot. That they buffer the landscape buffers provided with residential and neighboring residential properties, and that the fronts of the lots are buffered as well, and that there be a tree replacement equation that they'd have to comply with. You take a tree down, you gotta install a new one somewhere else, albeit smaller and younger, but you'd have to replant. That's it in a nutshell.
So it just seems like it's more refinement and policy on our existing policy for apartments in certain sections, and then some changes to development, theoretical development on Montgomery Avenue with conditions attached. I mean, I don't have any questions. I reviewed it, and I thought everything seemed to be just and appropriate. It all made sense. I spent a lot of time wrapping my brain around it and trying to get up to speed, and I thought they were good changes. But what's the committee think?
I agree.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the Part B, is that a change from conditional use to special exception, or was it always special exception in Montgomery?
There was never any
This is brand new.
zoning hearing board or council conditional use involvement. It's a new.
Okay.
So they're saying if you want to change, if you want to do something that contradicts the existing by right criteria, there's a special exception hearing for the zoning hearing board where you have to meet these 5 criteria or you will be denied. And the criteria are pretty specific.
Yep.
And they seem to jive with the intent of what the code is trying to create.
So when we had didn't we have a developer propose something that and as council we decided that, I guess there was a question about changing the by right.
Right, they came to.
And we decided not to do that.
They wanted us to change it by right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Okay, so that's helpful.
Yeah. All right, so no other questions there? Or anything else you want to add on that, Sean? Terrific. Okay. Resolution to approve the minor subdivision 838-840. Wasn't this the former Sun Valley Pizza where there's a twin that's essentially operated as a single, but it's still zoned inside as a twin, and they want relief from that?
Yeah.
Is there a reason we wouldn't just give that to them? Or am I making that too simple?
Yeah, I think it's good.
I mean,
I was looking for time savers where I could find them. All All right, resolution to approve tentative sketch land development plan for 100 Forest Avenue. Sean, can you introduce that to us, please?
Yeah, the development team was here for our workshop meeting. This is a project on the old gas station site of it's a mixed-use proposal. The unit count is 8 units on the second and third floors, and the first floor has around 1,900 square feet roughly of of retail space, and there are 6 off-street parking spaces on the lot. They don't have the building designed yet. They don't have to have it designed yet. We're only at the tentative sketch plan approval stage. Once this were assuming this was approved, they would then, their next step would be to submit preliminary plans where they would have to submit a much more extensive plan set that would illustrate what the building is supposed to look like, and those would in fact be enforceable, unlike some other codes or approval processes I've seen elsewhere where you don't really have to show what the building looks like, and you get a pretty picture, nonetheless, because pictures are enticing. This actually is regulated.
I don't have any questions. Does anyone in the committee have questions about this?
I think we could probably do it 100 and 203.
Simultaneous, it's the same presentation from last week almost.
I mean, I don't have any issues specific to either one on the sketch plan, I think.
Right, because we heard the presentation when we asked questions at that point too.
I'm just trying to give, I feel the same way. There's really nothing for
I'm
us
just
to.
thinking out loud.
Yeah.
So we kind of reviewed this.
Yeah, the presentation came in, we all asked our questions.
Yeah, I have a question that's related to these that's not even about the sketch plan, but since we're not running too far behind, Sean, since I have him here, I'm thinking of it, this is way down the road. But assuming they get through all the approvals, it was my question to the development team, you might remember, about the construction process. And
Same time or different?
Simultaneously, whether, how they do it, how it's managed in terms of the disruption to the downtown. I guess my question is, at what point in time do we have the capacity, or do we have the capacity to impose specific conditions on that? And how would they be monitored and enforced? Because that's my main concern about these projects. When does that come into play? When should I start worrying about that? Jumping up and down and yipping.
Bring it up at the preliminary plan stage, because in the preliminary plan approval stage, the approving resolution we do then would pose the same question to the solicitor. The approving resolution that council passes at that point will establish most of the framework for the development going forward.
Thanks.
And I echo your concern. If we're able to encourage them to do these at different times, and there's no unreasonable basis for that
I think it might be
request.
better to do them at the same time.
You think so?
But that's neither here nor there.
We're
The
just
point is-
opposed, but let's flush it out and find out what
Neither
makes
way.
sense.
I'm not sure which is right.
Yeah.
The point is to think it through, especially with everybody, with Ed and Sean and everybody
Right.
who's sitting.
I guess
back.
one
Everybody
big
sort of
disruption
understands
versus
that.
two.
And just make sure that we've really thought that through and we have that set up in advance so we have control over the process of the construction. Just want to make sure I'm sure
We're
you're.
very well practiced at having our downtown torn up over the last few years.
If there was a gold medal for that, it would be hanging right in that corner next to the Dickens poster.
It hasn't all been smooth. Yeah.
And it's the infrastructure. You guys handled it well. It's an old town. Great. And then we have a resolution ready with respect to the 2040 bike grant implementation.
Yeah. I don't have the whole grant package complete yet, so there hasn't been any changes. The budget really remains the same from what was presented at the workshop meeting. This is just the resolution that's needed
Because we have to
from
put
the
up some
county.
money, yeah.
And it's a way for the county to know that the municipality is really committed to it and is going to match the dollars that they say in the grant application. And our match includes a little over $9,200, $3,640 of labor, in-kind labor, and about $5,500 of cash. Thank you.
I think it's going to be a really, I'm glad we're moving forward with it. I hope the grant is granted. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, well, once we apply, that's out of our hands, and hopefully we'll do well.
Mm-hmm.
I think our chances are good.
I'd give us an A-. I like the bet. I'd say there's a much more likely than not. But yeah, good job. Any other questions on that?
Thank you for doing it. Yeah, it will hopefully accelerate our bike infrastructure. And together with the complete streets, I'm sure that fits in well with the application.
Yeah.
Great. So next we have a motion to approve an allocation of capital funds for protective vests for the Norwood Police Department. And I'm sure that has to be why we're lucky to have Chief Gallagher here tonight.
I'd like to thank the committee for their time. I made a presentation about this last week on Wednesday the 13th to the Public Safety Committee. Obviously, Councilman McCready was present as a member of that committee, and I certainly appreciate the time to make the same presentation. I'll keep it brief. I know the time is of the essence in anticipation of the next meeting. Basically, what we have is we have a scenario A and a scenario B presented to you, Councilwoman Schurz, about which vest package we can actually opt for. Public Safety Committee voted for scenario A. Basically, as a demonstration, that means that they opted to buy not only the panels that are inside this outer carrier, but also a new outer carrier. Now, these outer carriers for the officers, this is mine, by the way, which is only about 6 months old, on both the panels as well as the outer carrier. The panels inside have a 5-year lifespan. Now, the panels for 4 of the 5 officers that we currently have, myself included, that would be 6, expired in January of 2019. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't provide protection against the threat assessment that is designed for, unless there is damage to the vest panel. If the seams come out, they still function. One of the problems that we saw is, though, that these outer carriers that were provided by the vendor at the time, which was Reds the Uniform Tailor, which were purchased probably about a year before I did the capital improvement planning for the police department, these were about a year old at the time. And when I asked the officers how old they were, they told me, in fact, about 12 months. One of the things that I was negligent on was to find out exactly how old the panels were inside. I was under the impression that, based on what they told me, that the panels themselves were good for another 4 years. I know, based on experience, that the panels are good for 5 years. It's through no fault of the officers. I should have confirmed that before I did my deeper dive with the capital improvement plan. So I certainly apologize for any inconvenience. I had a discussion with the mayor about this, as well as Public Safety Committee.
Seems like a real, genuine transition issue.
Absolutely. It's just, this is a growing pains year for us as our new chief of police model that we have in the department. But with that in mind, I did present 2 scenarios. So the scenario that I have on A means that we would get brand new carriers for all the officers. Now, our newest officer, Officer Dan Dutton, he needs a new carrier. So that would be part of any package A or B. But if we got new vest panels for each officer with the threat, we're now going to go to our new vendor. The other vendor that we had, which was Reds the Uniform Tailor out of Reading, was purchased by a company out of Texas called Goals Uniform Manufacturing. That's no longer a sustainable model for us. We have been going with a new vendor, McDonald's Uniform in Northeast Philadelphia, which we're now consolidating with, because that's the same vendor that's used by the Volunteer Fire Company in Narberth. So we are very pleased with the products that we have gotten from McDonald's. They have the ability to order directly right from U.S. Armor, not only for the panels, but also for the outer carriers. Officer Dutton has panels that were provided by Point Blank. But the good news is that U.S. Armor is going to tailor make this outer carrier to fit those Point Blank panels. So scenario A is basically the one that includes the new vest panels as well as the outer carrier, and there's an undergarment carrier that's always included with any vest panel purchase.
That's a requirement.
Right, as a requirement, because you have to put it under your shirt. Now, with that in mind, these outer carriers are very good because it alleviates pressure on the officer's back and hips, because you can put suspenders underneath, and they can actually hold up your belt. As I demonstrate here, it can hold up your belt and take a lot of weight off your posture. And it actually shifts weight to underneath this on a suspender. So this is very good, it's very advantageous, and it's great if you're working a 12-hour shift. I highly encourage, definitely, this for all the officers. I wear one myself. The issue that we have to decide in front of FNA is obviously which scenario we would go with, because these carriers that the officers currently have, 4 of the 6 rather, even though about a year and a half old, they have become torn, worn, and frayed.
Let me ask, if I can cut you short for a second, did you say there's a 2-year lifespan on the carrier? Or?
No, the carrier, it depends on how much use it's.
So there's no rating for a carrier?
Not the carrier, the panels have a 5-year
and they're
lifespan.
up last month?
Right.
Okay.
So the panels, Councilman, were actually issued in January of 2014, hence January of 2019, they're expired. But the good news is we already have things ready to go with the vendor. Once we place the order, once we get the green light for approval on this spending, whether A or B, the one thing that's really important that I point out is whether we go with A or B scenario, we're still making sure that the officers are safe. Now, with that in mind, the Public Safety Committee voted for scenario A just based on the appearance of and the concerns that we have with some of the outer carriers. So that's basically my presentation to the FNA tonight.
So, yeah, and that's what. I actually heard, but you can tell us. You're on public safety.
Yeah, so I just want to follow the chief and say that public safety considered these 2 scenarios, and we voted unanimously for A, and that's our recommendation. And as the chief is saying, in terms of safety, we'll cover that with either scenario, but we voted for A because the cost benefits seem to make sense.
If the carriers are worn out, I mean, and that's not like it's a difference of 40 grand.
No, we're talking about maybe $1,200 to $1,400.
$1,000,
Yeah.
Michelle, do you
Yeah.
just want to be democratic and make, So I think we can introduce this tonight.
Along with the recommendation.
I think we should just introduce A, and I'll just mention that there's an option B. There's a $1,200 difference for worn out carriers, which are essentially, I'll butcher this, but it's the vest without the panels in it.
What's the 10%? I'm curious.
I always bake in 10% of the final cost just for any deltas or any increases that are unforeseen.
Okay, got it.
There's going to be some fee.
Yeah, well, and actually our vendor's pretty straightforward.
I was kidding.
I'm pretty confident that he's going to be tight to the original number that's
Okay,
quoted.
all right, thanks.
So it could actually be cheaper.
Oh, I think it'll actually be a little more towards 6174 versus that of 6791.
Okay.
That's terrific.
Good.
That's well, I mean, yeah, and it's it's safety. You don't cheap out on safety. So awesome. Well, thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thank
we're
you.
pleased to follow
Thank
the public safety recommendation. We'll introduce this evening.
I appreciate the committee's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you.
Congrats on all the kudos you've been getting lately
Oh,
with
thank
respect
you.
to traffic safety.
I appreciate
Making a
that.
lot of NARB moms happy, and dads too.
We got to keep the kids safe.
All right, so that takes us to our last action item, which I'm excited to discuss, but we'll let Sean introduce where we're at and what we may do tonight. Our regional street light procurement program. We're about to consider embarking on phase 2.
Okay, so in October of last year, Council authorized the borough to engage DVRPC, Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, through their partner consultant Keystone Lighting Solutions to investigate the feasibility of swapping out Narberth's electric lighting infrastructure with upgraded LED technology. That process started November 2018, and it was no cost to the borough. There had been, up until that point, a ante-up fee that DVRPC eliminated to get some of the smaller communities that had been sitting on the sidelines in the first round of this regional streetlight procurement effort. And we took advantage of that. So we, at a no upfront cost, we got a feasibility study presented to us at this month's workshop meeting, which roughly stated what they did was they looked at all of our energy bills. They worked a lot with Matt to sift through our inventory of streetlights and understand how much energy the borough was using, and then do a swap scenario to replace that infrastructure. And I'll cut to the chase and say total swap cost is right around $210,000, and it would generate an immediate year one out to infinity cost savings of about $49,000 a year in terms of electricity usage.
That alone, where can you make 25% in a year?
So it's about a 50% reduction in energy costs. Right?
So the cash flow analysis on page 19 of the feasibility report suggests a 5-year loan that can be paid for entirely from the energy cost savings, because the annual loan payment would be $45,000. I mentioned the cost savings at $49,000. And those loan payments would cease after 5 years. So at the end of 5 years, the borough would start to accrue $48,000 a year of money it would have spent on electricity. And that money would accrue mainly in our highway aid fund and allow us to do more with highway aid dollars, which is essentially repair and improve our streets, our signs, our crosswalks, our traffic calming improvements, everything street related. We have just sort of started to scratch the surface in terms of leveraging highway aid to reach our goals and our policies that are evolving with complete streets, with traffic safety, with pedestrian safety, with bike infrastructure. So I'm excited about this from personally speaking, because I think it's kind of like planting an orchard. You don't get any apples the first 4 or 5 years, but it's 10 years down the line when you're walking through the orchard and you look and you see all the fruit that you plan for on the tree. It's very rewarding. There is an upfront cost at this point. What we need to decide is if we want to take step 2. Phase 2 is project development, and that's when they come out and do a field audit. They design and analyze our lighting system. They tell us specifically what kinds of technology and fixtures we would be purchasing and replacing. They geolocate everything. They give us good geodata at the end of the process. But there's an $8,300 upfront fee that we pay for the privilege of this work being done. So if we get to June, which is when this phase 2 is expected to be done, and that coincides with our capital improvement planning process, if we decide to go forward and make the investment, we're going to have another deeper discussion with bigger dollar signs, a bigger upfront investment that we'll have to make at that time to leverage the dollars we're investing today. So I think it's a prudent thing to do at this point. It is $8,300 that we haven't budgeted this year that'll have to come out of the general fund. But we have to laugh new cake.
And even if we didn't, this is a gift. Yeah.
It's an investment.
That's correct. Yeah, it's an investment.
It pays dividends quickly.
Well, it's something that our constituents will love. It's environmental, and it's going to save money.
Yeah.
Better quality, less light pollution.
Yeah. Well, it's a model, I think, for what we could do more of. I mean, because we're achieving a 50% reduction in electric, in energy use.
Yeah.
And that could be a goal for energy use in our building.
I can't imagine why we wouldn't proceed, but we'll introduce it and just give everyone an opportunity. But I think so. Phase 2 is paying the $8,300.
Correct.
To have the study done with respect to our current light inventory and what recommendations will be on our platter for moving forward.
And I don't want you to lose sight also that it's kind of we're going to get that back, because that's also that $8,300 is included in the financing, so it's all going to be paid for. So even though
and the financing is paid for by the state.
Correct.
That's
so
right.
Even though we're putting up the $8,300, we're getting it back in year 1. So it's just we're kind of like fronting it.
It's a loan. It's relative to the project.
Right.
Yeah.
And also the other thing I wanted to point out is that while we are losing, if you look, the only column that is red is maintenance cost savings. We're going to incur, it's about $1,000 a month in maintenance costs. We're already paying for that now in the rate that you talked about tonight. That's already baked into it. But what I really like about it is that it puts the control of maintenance in our office. Right now, we get so many complaints about streetlights, and it's a very difficult thing ever since I've been here to manage that. PICO pays a third-party maintenance provider that we contact, but they're not beholden to us. We don't have a contract with them. We can't hold their feet to the fire. So I really like the idea of, having the maintenance responsibility on the borough, that where we can manage a contract, that we would hire a maintenance firm to come in. And the maintenance is pretty low. They've
Right.
got a 20-year warranty
Right.
on the bulbs themselves.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
So our
that's
public
great.
works crew would be in charge of maintenance on the,
We probably have to go with a lighting firm. We don't have a bucket truck, nor do we have an electrician certified.
okay, so we contract that out, but it'd be a contractor that we direct.
And that's what this guy who spoke at the workshop, this is his thing.
Oh, you can tell, yeah.
Yeah, he's into it. And he has a really good, he has his finger on the pulse of how much it would cost in our universe. He's done a drive around in the borough, kind of, identified the types of lights. And he's quite familiar with southeastern Pennsylvania. He's pretty confident in those numbers.
Well, good job, and thanks to Matt and Sean for
Yes,
bringing
thank
this
you.
project from its infancy to our table. And I'm excited about this one. I think this is a great
Yeah,
idea.
I am too.
Everyone's going to like this.
It's a win-win,
Yeah.
both from a philosophy standpoint, environmentalism, as well as from a cost savings standpoint. Almost $250,000, over $250,000 in 20 years savings.
That's
I'm
awesome.
sorry, $750,000.
That's huge.
It is.
Well, thanks. And I'm excited to introduce that tonight. I think that's good government. It's responsible. Anything else from the committee members for tonight? Okay. Well, with that, Mr. Spear, we will adjourn this evening's Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Thank you.